Jags to make it 28-3. Arthur Blank loving it. Up by 25. Toss to White. He's in! What a comeback!
All right, welcome to another episode of the 28-3 podcast. We are a few days removed from the epic shit show that was the Thursday night football game against the Jaguars. So today we're going to do a quick recap of that, and then we'll just give some general thoughts about the Saints moving forward. So Nick is actually on location today, so we'll go ahead and let him start us off. So Nick, go ahead and give us some thoughts about the game and anything else you want to bring up.
Yeah, I think, as far as the game, pretty much on brand for the year so far, especially in the first half. We saw another groupie missed field goal. We saw an offense that can't convert inside the opponent's 30 over and over and over again. We, in this one, we got behind early, just like we did last week and I believe in the Tampa game, and had to make that gap up. We showed some signs of life on offense in the second half, but, once again, we have all sorts of, players across the entire offense failing in crucial spots. Olave looked disinterested once again. Carr looked sporadic once again. We had a new entry into the shit show group this week with Foster dropping about as easy as a touchdown you can have an opportunity at. That inevitably cost us going to overtime. I think the only positive I can say about the offense over the last, the marginal improvement is that we're actually moving the ball where we weren't the previous 3 weeks. We did get, a couple touchdowns. One was the most ridiculous effort of 4 plays from the 1 yard line, and it took the 4th play and Taysom getting in there. The Mike Thomas play was an incredible catch. So maybe there's some small signs of light there, but, that's a game with as well as we got into their territory. You got to score 30 when you're moving the ball that well. We dominated time of possession. We won the turnover battle. We outgained about, I think, 75-ish yards. If you look at the stat sheet, you would never believe we lost that game. And somehow we found a way to do it, executing whatever we're doing. Call it coaches, call it players, call it a mix of both. Whoever you want to blame, I think is fair. That's a game you can't lose. You've pretty much had every statistical category across the board. So once again, pretty disappointing. I would hope our defense stops giving up 2 early touchdowns like they did against the Texans and the Jags. And I would hope at some point the offense can start freaking getting the ball in the damn end zone. It's just gotten to be ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the 4 plays from the 1 yard line. Not that anyone gives a shit, but Kamara missing it on 3 straight cost me $100. But I'll leave that at that.
Don't tell us about your parlay.
Yeah, no kidding. But
yeah, I mean, I went ahead and decided to torture myself last night, and I rewatched basically every offensive series, and it was just, you're right. You said it, Nick. It's like you have to score, and it's more conflicting too, because it's like sometimes the play calls look like shit, and I feel like, great, we're right in saying Carmichael's got to go, and then other times you're kind of like, well, wait, maybe those plays weren't all that bad. Like, what the hell is going on here? Overall, I think it goes back to the fact that, like, we made the car, and now, like, not Derek Carr, but we made a vehicle analogy last pod. And the car is just fucking broken. We tried to say transmission. We tried to say different parts of the car. I mean, I hate to say it, but, like, you got to turn it. You turn the car in. I mean, maybe you salvage some parts, but, like, we got a lemon. I started to make that analogy before, but I was like, maybe it's not really a lemon, because when it's a lemon, the whole thing goes away. But I'm like, this thing seems like a lemon right now, and but Carr, look, rewatching it, Carr made some inexcusable mistakes. So you can't, people who are trying to defend Derek Carr by saying, I'm not calling you out here, Max, but
I have never once defended Carr.
No.
Don't even lump me into that group.
No, I mean, like, people who are going like, it's the receivers, it's Olave, it's not Carr, it's Carmichael, it's not Carr. He doesn't have time to throw, so it's not on him. No, he completely fucked up in that first half and in the third quarter. But it was compounded because you also then had receivers and even Kamara running wrong routes at times. It was just a complete and utter shit show.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to put it. We've touched on it multiple times over the past 3 or 4 weeks. Basically, it's blood is on everyone's hands.
Yeah,
and using the car analogy, it's like that car that caught on fire that you see just on the side of the road that nobody's, the tow truck hasn't picked up yet. It's like that's our offense right now. But it's that burnt to a crisp car that's sitting on the side of the interstate.
But it's like seeing a Lamborghini burnt to a crisp, because that's at least the hopes that we all had for this offense. Is like, and I don't think it's hyperbole. I mean, we went through in our preseason preview just like how many weapons we had going into the season, and the Derek Carr we thought we were going to get. We all just hope against hope that he was going to be this John Gruden style Derek Carr. And so it's like seeing this beautiful, fast ass, powerful sports car just burnt to a crisp. And, we saw flashes of that in the second half, but it was too little too late. And
I think Lamborghini's a bit optimistic. I would have said something like it's a, it's a Mercedes, or it's a lower end Mercedes on the side.
Okay, maybe Lamborghini's.
I don't think any of us. I don't think any of us expected something, top level QB. But the one thing I would say, not defending Carr, but that the people who are saying it's just a car. No, that it's just a car problem. You're wrong, because when he actually is making the throws, we aren't making the plays. And when he's missing throws, that's costing us huge, especially like Corey said in the first half. He missed open people all over the place. There's no debating it. He gets it together, I think, for the most part in the second half, and then Olave's dropping that one inside the red zone at the 8 or 9 yard line on a 2nd and 8. Foster's drop, and then or Kamara running the wrong. I mean, Kamara doesn't make that mistake. We've seen him for 6-7 years now. He's the best in the league at reading that play, and he immediately said, "My bad." He never does that. And so even when he's doing the right thing, it seems like that's when everyone else decides to do the wrong thing. And hey, let's call that, you could maybe even put that on Carr too, because the communication between everybody isn't on where it should be right now. But what I'm saying is when you could make up the difference for what Carr is lacking when he's that, and he does make a play and you just drop it, or, we miss it, it's frustrating as hell, because you think someone on the team could step up and make something happen that could change the outcome of these games. Because these are 1-score games, all except for Tampa, right? So these are 1, 2, 3 plays away from being a completely different game and overcoming some of the mistakes Carr made this week, especially in the first half, selling for field goals every time. I just think the situational part of this team just isn't working. It's someone's making a mistake, and it's a different person almost all the time.
Yeah, and I said this, I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out our guys, Saints City and Me podcast. I was a guest on their podcast just a couple days ago, and we talked a lot about the game. And one thing that I mentioned on their pod, and it's something I thought about post-game, is that, I think this is just bigger than X's and O's for our guys. And look, I know that sounds very cerebral, very meta, but like when you mentioned Carr kind of getting back within his own game when we did the hurry up and him looking just completely out of sorts in the first half, it's like we're pressing so much as an offense. I think everybody, and look, I know these guys are professionals, but I think everybody's in everybody's heads. It's like in Top Gun, the original one. If you think, you're dead. And I think Carr is, especially as the QB, is overthinking the shit out of so many of these play calls, so many of these audibles. Now that doesn't explain why he's making some of these like seemingly first read check down passes where he's hitting the third step of his drop and then just hitting the check down first, not going through his progressions. But it's like he's in his own head too much in the first half. He's worried about the pass rush. He's bailing out before he should bail out. And then when he does get the ball off, he's like trying to place it in there with too much touch. Like one of those passes to Olave was just, if he'd have zipped it in there, it would have been fine. He put too much touch on it and it floated. Olave should have caught it. Yeah. But, but juxtaposed to the second half and the hurry up, or really the fourth quarter, when there's no time to think. You're just in a dogfight with a bunch of MiG-28s at that point. And
Quick
you're
question,
just
Corey, for you.
Yeah.
Based on that, what you're just saying, because there's something I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead.
Do you think we should just start going quick the whole game?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, some offenses have that as their base offense. It's not like everyone wants to call it a hurry up. I mean, call it whatever the fuck you want to call it. Just run it. Eric McCoy, who's one of your biggest boys on the team, is saying, if that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. And if anybody's going to be sucking wind running a hurry up offense, it's your goddamn center. Okay? So if your center is the one saying, let's go, then let's go. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And right now, at least that offense, besides the debacle that happened at the end of the game with not getting the ball into the end zone to tie the game with 4 plays to do it. Now, granted, we ran one that was a good play call for a touchdown. They had a misassignment. There were 2 defenders on the wide receivers, so it was blown coverage on their part. It wasn't a beautiful play design by Carmichael. If they'd have manned up on everybody, Foster would have been covered too. We still need better play calling in the red zone. I think that's the one place where the play calling, just Carmichael has seemed to shat the bed no matter how good he is between the 20s.
Yeah, and my issue with that last sequence, the 4 straight plays where we couldn't tie the game at the end, where the hell was Kamara and Taysom at that point? We had timeout.
Yeah.
We had time.
Where's Colin Saunders?
I remember, well. Yeah, exactly. We got down there, and I remember looking at the clock thinking, okay, we've actually got plenty of time to do this. We can run the ball if we need to. Where the hell was that? They run, multiple passes that are low completion percentage targets, and it's like, what the fuck are we doing? There's just no rhyme or reason to the decision making once we get inside the red zone.
It goes back to the Madden style play calling, or the high school coach
they're just calling plays.
Like when high school coaches can stand behind the players in the JV games, and they've got a little index card, and they're like, "Yeah, run this one, run that one." There's no cohesiveness. There's no book being written of the offensive play calling like we used to see back in the.
Well, it's like Kamara said, you're not playing matchups anymore. They're just out here. They're just out here calling plays.
I think out of all the quotes, that was my favorite one because it's like, can we just in baseball, especially back in the 70s, 80s, you had player managers. Let's just let Kamara just call the plays. Just give him the damn wristband and he can bark at everybody from the field. I know that won't happen, but he can see it. Whenever we post this to YouTube, it's going to be great, because y'all get to see a little behind the scenes action.
Well, no, it's more I'm just trying to figure out how much time he has left, and I know he's got to go to an event. So
I'm making some light of our
I'm good for
situation here.
No big rush.
All right, well, cool. Why don't we let's do a little recap, because honestly, this game has been dissected backwards and forwards all over social media, all over the news, all over radio.
You mean you don't want to talk about the 3rd down play again?
The now infamous
Olave. I've never seen a 3rd down miss be talked about more.
I have seen that play broken down so many times, and I've seen literally every explanation for who was at fault or what went wrong. And there's multiple sides of the fence on this one. I'm not even touching that one. I haven't said a word about that play. I don't intend to say anything about that play. It is what it is. To me, it's indicative of a larger problem.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I'm not interested in trying to find out who's at fault on that singular play.
Yep.
Yeah,
because the reality is shit is broken.
I'm going to touch it, Max. I'm going to touch it.
I will too, because...
Well, hold on.
Go ahead.
Nick, you go first.
I'm not going to touch X's and O's, though.
I'll go first, too, because it has nothing to do with that play. That reaction on that play is due to a systemic performance by Olave and how where his effort level is, in my opinion. There's no way Carr is undressing there for lack of effort. And you can say the play was designed for him. It wasn't. It was designed for Taysom underneath. You can say whatever you want. Everybody can break it down however they want. I get it. He did not do what he was supposed to do regardless. So why is the people who are super upset about Carr's reaction, I don't understand that. And saying it's not leadership. Olave, they're like, he's a second-year receiver. Are we worried about Olave's feelings? Because he seems to have a lot of them, and he seems to kind of be in them all the time, and sometimes is in the game, sometimes not. We've talked about this for 4 straight weeks now. At what point is he going to start doing his job the way everyone expects him to, and to honor the talent that he has, because he's such a dynamic player if he's given max effort? So I don't have much of a problem with that.
I'm glad that was your take. This is like vintage 28-3 because I don't disagree with you 100%, but I do. My take on it, which was again not X's and O's, but I'm not saying I don't think that one play is enough to say that quote Derek Carr is not a leader end quote. But I will say this: everything you said about Olave is correct, Nick. There is a systemic issue with Carr and Olave being on the same page, whether it's their attitudes towards each other. Maybe they're boys outside the locker room, and then they just don't jive inside the locker room. But here's my take.
I highly doubt that.
I know I highly doubt it either. But here's where I stand on it. Yes, Carr had reason to not a right, but a reason to be upset. As upset as he was with whatever it was going on inside Olave's head on that play. That said, if he doesn't have the reaction that he has on that play, if he just sucks it up and walks to the sideline and then maybe gets in Olave's face where he knows the cameras can't see him, or like subtle, or just like, when I say gets in his face, like talks to him close enough to where you can't see Derek Carr's facial expressions. But if he just walks to the sideline on that play, we're not talking about it nearly as much as we're talking about it. It's purely because, I mean, it was a great example of how bad the miscommunication has been. And it would have absolutely been talked about as in, holy shit, how did this play go this wrong? But if Derek Carr just acts like, just holds it in and goes to the sideline and then deals with it, it is a completely different story. It is not getting dissected as much as it should. And the only other thing I got on that is like, so as a leader, you can have fuck ups. Like you can have instances where you faltered and had a my bad moment. Breeze had many moments, maybe didn't get that livid on the field, but like Breeze had moments where you're like, that wasn't a very leadership type thing to do. You have lapses in leadership, but if you're Derek Carr, I'm sorry, man, you got to keep it more under control than what you did. I'm not saying you don't have a reason to be upset, but as the face of the offense, you've got to keep more composure than you did in that situation.
Yeah, and here's another way to look at it. If we're, what are we right now? We're 3-4. If we're 5-2 at this point, people are going to look at that situation and say, "Oh, that's great leadership." But the fact that Carr is
the game.
Right. Yeah. But the fact that Carr is playing losing football right now and the team is playing losing football right now, the narrative is flipped on its head and he's being an asshole and he's going about it the wrong way. You know what I mean? It's always like if you're winning, that changes everyone's perspective on everything.
I'll give you a case in point. And yes, this is a Georgia football reference, but it was in the national championship game where I believe, was it Roquan or no, it was Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean in the national championship against Alabama. There was a play where one of his, whether weak side or strong side linebackers just completely missed an assignment, and the play didn't go for a touchdown, but it could have. And they talked about it on screen. Nakobe Dean is like flipping out worse than Carr did on his linebacker. He is in his face mask to face mask, and they literally looked at that example and said, "Look at this leadership. He's coaching up his player." And then the next play, the guy did the right play. The guy was right on his guy and broke up a third down, saved a touchdown. And everyone's like, Nakobe Dean, the leader.
Right. And that's because Nakobe Dean performed in every game he ever played at Georgia. So.
Well, and it was winning football. It was on a winning team.
Right.
And so, yeah. But Carr's got to suck it up. I'm sorry. You can't be a baby on the football field. But I'm not saying that he was in the wrong. But even if you're right, that's the difference between a Breeze and a Carr. When you're right, you know you're right. You don't have to go make the whole world know you're right and flip out like a child on national TV just to prove it. Just be right and move on.
Well, I do remember Breeze flipping out on Jeremy Shockey in a very animated, let's call it, discussion on the sideline. That got captured by the TV cameras.
At least he was on the sideline,
Now, look, again, no one here is defending. I'm not defending Carr. Like I think Carr is he's out of here at the latest after next season when that contract becomes more palatable to get rid of. Maybe even sooner, man, because, the Saints have never been afraid to cut bait on a player if they see it's a massive mistake. Junior Gillette being the prime example. They signed him to a massive extension. The next year he was gone and we had to eat the cap charge. So if they look at it and say, hey, this guy's not the answer, we need to get him out of here, he'll be gone.
Dude, if Derek Carr ends up in the Junior Gillette bucket of cut bait, this is going to be a real long season.
Yeah, and look, one issue I have with the way we're all, when I say we, I'm talking about the Saints community as a whole, and that's across all methods of social media, radio, TV, everything. It's like we're all getting granular with every single play. Like on this single play, this person is at fault. And on this single play, this person is at fault, and we all have our horses in the race. Corey touched on that yesterday or the other day on the Saint City Me podcast. Everyone has their guy that they pick on. Everybody has their guy that they prop up, and it's all different ones. But the two primary ones recently on the player standpoint have been Carr and Olave because it's the easiest to pick on them. We're not going to question Michael Thomas's effort ever. We're not going to question Alvin Kamara's, effort ever.
But Nick will.
Periodically. But the reality is, like, the two ones who were, I guess, in the spotlight the most with either, I guess, I don't want to say lack of effort because it's, interpret it how you will, but the two who are in the spotlight the most are Derek Carr and Chris Olave. And those are the two most polarizing figures right now in the Saints community. Yeah. And as far as fans go. And look, man, I see it from both sides. Neither one of them. I'm not going to defend one and then prop up the other one. I'm going to go ahead and tell you neither one of them are doing what the hell they need to be doing. Now, Carr has the more high-profile position on the team. He is the quote-unquote de facto leader, being that he's the quarterback.
Yeah.
And there's only 32 starting quarterbacks in the world.
I mean, allegedly, because I would say just because you're starting for an NFL team doesn't even mean you're a starting quarterback. So
right. My point is, he is the person who is going to be looked at as the leader. He needs to be the bigger person. He needs to be representing himself and the team better than he is doing.
Yeah.
That being said, Olave needs to kick himself in the ass. And look, he said the right things, after the first week where there were issues about his route running and effort on that. He said, look, some people close to me called me out on it. They got me in line. I know what's up. I'm gonna get it going forward. The problem is that was 3 games ago. And we're still seeing it didn't work. Like, we're still seeing examples of him. And again, I'm not turning this in. I've said my piece on Olave enough this week on Twitter. It was probably too much. I'm not saying anything more about his effort, but he needs to kick it in gear. The rest of the offense needs to kick it in gear. Like these offensive linemen, what the hell's going on with Penny? When we have people coming off the street who are performing 5 times better than the normal offensive line was.
Yeah, Cam Irving
was fantastic the other day.
By the way, like Penning's play as of late made Cam Irving look like one of the best free agent pickups since DeMario Davis.
And look, it's the whole thing. The offense is broken, and that starts at the top, man.
Yep.
We're sitting here, we're worried about the smaller guys in this, and we got to look at the big picture. The big picture is Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael. Those guys are the problem right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a good segue. Because
that's what we need to be focusing on as a fan base. We need to be focusing on those two fuckers.
Yeah, don't lose the be able to see the trees from the forest. It's like the way Max was talking about Olave, where he said the right things in week 1 or whatever it was, Bucks game. And, here we are, flash forward. We're going into week 8. It's, I look at everybody saying that Kirk Herbstreit on the national broadcast, when I rewatched it last night, he's just like, it's just Derek Carr and these guys. You can see that they're still trying to work out the kinks. And I know that Herbstreit knows better than to think like that working out the kinks is still acceptable because it's too far down the road to still have to be working out the kinks. And if you have your primary players, like again, to the car analogy, like your pistons that make that engine run that are not greased up, they're clanking against each other. They're ruining the motor. It's like, it's too late for that. If that shit's still going on at this mile marker, then that tells you that whoever's responsible for tuning up the car is completely losing and completely fucking that up. And that on offense to me, is Pete Carmichael, or specifically the position coaches, or a sum of the whole. And I know, we said it, Dan on the Saints podcast, Saint City and Me podcast said, it's a cop out, but it's not a cop out, because head coaching is what gets, I know these guys are all professionals and grown ass men, but you still have the coaching who is responsible for getting them to do the things that it is they're supposed to be doing. That's not happening right now. Pete Carmichael, that's fine if you're an offensive genius. That's fine if you allegedly can draw up some beautiful schemes and X and O this and X and O that. But when you are promoted to the OC position, whether you wanted it or not, again, it's like Derek Carr. You're the QB. You are the leader, unquestioned, of the whole team on the field. You got to suck it up and be a bigger man in that Olave situation. With Pete Carmichael, whether you wanted it or not, you got the job, okay? So you are now the head coach of the offense. You need to make sure that every detail under your wing of the team is taken care of, and it's clearly not. And then it goes to Max's point. Above him is DA, because DA is the guy who wanted Pete there and is just letting him, do whatever.
I'm past blaming Carmichael. I'm blaming the guy who put Carmichael in charge. He is the one who is the issue at the root of all of this. It's Dennis Allen. It's always been Dennis Allen. It's been Dennis Allen since day one. I said it last September. I don't remember what game it was, and I put up the hashtag fire Dennis Allen in September.
Yeah.
Like, this motherfucker he's not a leader. He's not a head coach. He is not fit to be running an organization.
Yeah, I do agree with that too. I highlight how bad Carmichael is because exactly what you said. Dennis Allen is the one who put Carmichael in that position and was insistent that Carmichael be in that position to the point of giving Doug Peterson a Zoom call interview, which is just embarrassing.
It's a sham interview.
You should almost be fired for that.
That's Loomis, though. That's Loomis. That's not Dennis Allen.
Well, then maybe we got to take a look at Loomis as well.
We do. We need to.
And
no. Nick has been driving the Loomis is not nearly as good as everyone thinks he is. Trained for 10 plus years at this point. So no. Pete did do a good job. I think honestly, you're going to see Penning on the bench if everyone's healthy for the rest of the season. That they are obviously gung ho on having him sit back, watch, hopefully learn the rest of the season. We're essentially halfway through the season at this point. So I think if everyone's healthy, man, ideally you got Ramczyk at the right tackle once the concussion issue's over. You're going to have Cesar Ruiz at the right guard. Center, obviously, Eric McCoy. Left guard, left tackle, that's where it gets tricky. I think they want to have Hurst at left tackle and Pete at left guard. Left tackle seems to be Hurst's more natural position. And obviously Pete is, as much shit as he's gotten, and we've touched on this over the last few weeks, Pete is a road grader in the run game. He gets out in front of the running back in the screen game as well, and he does a great job. He has gotten his fair share of flack over the years from the Saints fan base. And honestly, most of it's unwarranted. And we've established that it's mainly due to the contract that he got. That's the reason Pete gets so much hate. But the reality is Pete is a good starting left guard in the NFL. And so I think that's what the line would look like. Ideally, Hurst, left to right, Hurst, Pete, McCoy, Ruiz, Ramczyk. Honestly, at this point, I just want to be entertained when I'm watching the games because we have been, it's been 3 home games so far. And I'm going to tell you, I have had fun at these games for a grand total of about 6 minutes over the 3 games. It has been an awful, awful fan experience for the most part watching these games. So look, put whatever combination gives us the best chance. To me, that's the one that probably does. Cam Irvin's probably your swing guy, your 6th guy. And look, Pete is break in case of emergency. I'm sorry, not Pete. Penning is break in case of emergency only. But, I hate to agree with something Fletcher puts up, Fletcher Mackel. But when he put up, do we see Pete? I keep saying Pete. Do we see Penning at guard next year? And I think that's the very realistic thought. It happened with Robert Gallery, 10, 15 years ago with the Raiders. He was a highly touted offensive tackle prospect. I think he was the second or third pick in the draft, whatever year it was. People were expecting him to be the next great offensive tackle. He flamed out pretty quickly at the tackle position, and they moved him to guard, and he became a serviceable guard.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real good chance that we see that happen with Penning. Next year wouldn't shock me at all, depending on where our draft pick ends up in the first round, to see an offensive tackle be the first pick. And then you see Penning get the shot to compete at left guard once Pete's gone.
Yeah. Just for reference, we're trying to get Nick reconnected, but I'll keep it rolling. Is this the part where I bring up the fact that I suggested we trade up and draft an offensive tackle before the draft? And what episode was it? I think episode 5. But no, I don't think there's any issue with putting Penning at guard. I know that when I mentioned it in the pre-draft episode, Nick's first thing was, "That's a big ass guard," and maybe it is, but
not really, because he's 6'7" and Andrews Pete is 6'7".
Well, that's
so
what
it's the same height.
Y'all need to go back and listen to my brilliance in that pre-draft episode. No, but that's what I said. I said he's a big guard. That's fine, but he's a big guard. Let him be a big guard.
Yeah, who cares?
But because at this point we're seeing the alternative and it's not there. I'll say this on the offensive line: you could tell the difference when Pete was you can tell the difference in the run game is what I'm saying. So you're exactly right about Pete being better, as good as he did on the edge against Allen, which was impressive. There were a few times Allen's gotten by him in the game, but he's done that to pretty much everybody this year and will do that to everybody this year. But you could see the difference in the run game. When we try to run it, the normal running lanes that we tried to against when Pete wasn't there at guard, they just weren't there against Jacksonville. The running game, Kamara had a few good runs, sure, but Pete is better served at guard for running purposes. As much of a drop off as it might be to have Hurst at left tackle, I think it's marginal.
But it's not a drop off right now.
That's what I mean. I think if the difference between Pete at left tackle and Hurst at left tackle isn't so significant to where you should not put Pete at left guard. I think you need him for the run game.
Yeah.
You probably know better than me. What's the possibility of Cam playing a tackle position and only playing Hurst or Pete?
Cam Irving.
Yeah, no, Cam Irving plays all 5 positions on the offensive line. That was his claim to fame when he got drafted, when he was coming out of Florida State, because he started at center and at tackle at FSU. And that was the whole thing. It's like you can literally put him anywhere.
I want him playing.
He looked motivated. I mean, hell, he had rushing yards against the Jags. Put him in a fullback.
The yards didn't count. They pulled it back on him. It took his 4 yards away because it was in the final few minutes of the game. You can't advance it, but he definitely got a carry.
I gotta say, he showed great vision, ball security. Really did well.
Yeah, the only issue, Cam's, he's 31 years old. That's the only problem. It's like, I wish he were a little bit younger. Because the way he performed, that's one of those guys you definitely bring back for training camp next year, just to have him competing for depth. I think he's a fantastic 6 offensive lineman. And for all intents and purposes, Penning is now the 7th / maybe jumbo tight end. The old Zach Strief role. But I don't think we see Penning again this year unless the injuries get catastrophic like they were the last 2 weeks on the offensive line.
I agree, 100%. I would just like to see him give Cam, a chance at a tackle position and leave Pete or Hurst, whoever they think, inside a guard, and just try it, because it looked better this week. And I agree. I don't think Pete, you leave him out there. I'd rather see Ramczyk come back and bookend it with Cam on the other side and see if we get the same type of production as we did this.
So you're saying Cam instead of Hurst?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was better pass pro, especially considering you're going up against Trayvon Walker and Allen. But
Josh Allen.
The running, I'm like, is it really Josh Allen? Yeah, it's Josh Allen. But the running game was much more inconsistent in my mind than past weeks. But then again, if you're talking about the Patriots game, it's not really a factor anymore in terms of a check mark.
Yeah.
But
I'll let y'all finish up. I've got to run, so y'all finish it up.
All right, man. Enjoy the races.
We'll see y'all on the next one.
Later.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the offensive line, it definitely was better this week. I wasn't expecting anything out of them, but in the back of my mind, I kind of had this weird feeling, and you'll remember this in the Super Bowl year when we had we were playing the Patriots, and our defensive backs were just so banged up. We were signing people off the street. We signed Chris McAllister off the street basically to play a prominent role in that game, and we ended up blowing the Patriots out of the building. With this ragtag group of defensive backs. So I kind of had a feeling that they would overperform. It was Thursday Night Football. These guys have pride. They are professionals. So it was encouraging to see that. So let's see what happens. We go back to the quarterback. We go back to the coaching. We go back to the offensive culture in general. There's obviously issues. Like you're looking at, kudos to Kamara for week after week being the one guy who stands in front of the media and honestly answers questions. When they're asking him, do you feel like the offense has turned the corner? Most people would give you the standard, oh yeah, we're improving, we're seeing this, we're seeing that. Kamara will look at you and say, no, we haven't turned the corner.
Yeah.
And I love the honesty of that. To me, he has exhibited the most leadership ability of anyone on the offense. It's good to see Michael Thomas stepping up as well. It's those two guys have exhibited the leadership that we need Carr to show. Yeah. And it's just, we're not getting it out of Carr. I'll be the first to admit I was dead wrong about Derek Carr and what his performance would be in this offense. Like, I thought he could prop up, if we just had decent coaching, I figured he could prop it up and bump us up a level. When the reality is he can't. He is only as good as his coaching at this point, and his coaching is shit. So the performance we're getting on the field is shit.
Yep.
And just not to harp on it, but every single person on the offense has blood on their hands.
Yeah.
From the coaches, starts with the coaches, but it filters down to the players. And while I would love to see everyone play every single snap like they're Michael Thomas, it's just not going to happen. Right. Because everyone's not wired the way he is. Like, if you look at Michael Thomas, and you look at his eyes in the middle of the game, that dude's got the same look in his eyes that Michael Jordan had when they were in the playoffs or in a championship game.
It's utter and complete focus. He's totally zoned in. It's like also mentioned it to Mike and Dan too, like Tiger Woods. For all of his flaws off the course historically, and he's supposedly turned his life around or whatever. We're not going to get into that, but I saw him once in person at the Bay Hill in Orlando, and you couldn't get inside of his, people trying to give him high five, people were trying to say, hey Tiger, hey Tiger, hey Tiger. The guy was just so zoned in, and I bring up his reference because you could actually get within a few feet of him on a golf course. You can't get within 2 or 3 feet of Drew Brees or Mike Thomas. And so when you see an ultimate competitor in any sport, in the history of sports, like Tiger Woods, and you can just see how zoned in he is, and you can compare that, I think, to the way Mike Thomas gets zoned in. You can compare it to the way that Brees was zoned in back in the day. And, you're right. We can't have every single guy like that, but I still think it's not too much to ask that it be more than 2.
Yeah.
I mean, Carr needs it, or even, half of it. I don't think he has even half of that right now. And like I said with Carr, I think the biggest issue with Derek Carr, and it might be the same issue with Olave, is that those two guys are way too much in their own heads. They're overthinking everything clearly, and they just need to play. I mean, just go out there and play ball and screw what everybody else thinks. Screw worrying about screwing it up. They're playing like they're scared to fail instead of just playing with reckless abandon.
Yeah, and I think a big thing right now is, look, we're all frustrated as a fan base, and I think I can definitively speak for the entire Saints fan base when I say this. We're all frustrated. Yeah. We're not all on the same page because, all of us have our dogs in the race and we're picking sides, and, which is never really a good thing. And I'm just as guilty of it as everybody else. But the reality is we are all frustrated. We know the players are frustrated. The coaches are frustrated. The front office is frustrated. But we've got to, I think we just need to really turn our focus on what the bigger issue is. And the bigger issue, to me, it's Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
Dennis Allen should not be in charge
Yeah.
of a team, you know, and it's like, as far as like my comments on Olave or tweets on Olave, like, look, I love Chris Olave coming out. It's one of the 4 or 5 times the Saints actually picked a player I wanted in the first round. You know, some of the other times being Reggie Bush, Ricky Williams, Dante Stallworth, Malcolm Jenkins, you know, and I was beyond excited. And it frustrates me because I can look at him and see that he has the talent to be one of the 10 best receivers in football, you know, but there's just some little things he's got to clean up. And look, it's part of it is a maturity thing. You know, Zion gets so much flack from the national media and the local fan base, you know, when the reality is the Pelicans drafted him when he was 18 years old, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And we got to realize, and I need to realize it as well, that Olave is a 22, 23-year-old kid. You know, he's not going to have it figured out in year 2. And I remember the old saying used to be, you had to give a wide receiver 3 years to really find themselves and hit their stride. I think nowadays, since we've seen people, you know, make it to the NFL and they hit it right away and they've adapted quicker than they used to, we're expecting more out of these guys than we should.
Yeah.
That being said, I really want to see the effort level that I see out of Mike Thomas, you know, on every play, whether the ball's going to him or not. And I'm talking about Olave, you know, same thing with everybody else on the offense. Like, I feel like Shaheed, you know, I don't question his effort ever, or it's just, you know, with him, it's simple nuances of learning how to play wide receiver. I mean, let's be real. The guy played at a Division, you know, 2 school.
Yeah, definitely doesn't have the same pedigree.
Right. You know, Olave came from a wide receiver factory at Ohio State. You know, just go down the line of these guys that were high first-round picks, and you got another 2 of them coming out in the draft next year who are probably both going to be first-round picks. You know, I think there's 5 or 6 of them that have been first-round picks over the last 3 years, and it's just the bar is so high expectation-wise for him.
Yeah.
And we've seen glimpses of it.
Right.
You know, and my comments about trading him was more from a standpoint of when we get to the point of having to pay him $25 to $30 million a year, I worry about paying that to someone who's 6 feet tall, about 185 pounds soaking wet, is not good on contested catches. It's not his game, admittedly. You know, he's in theory is supposed to be a supreme route runner. You know, more of a Marvin Harrison type. And I just want to see him so badly. I want to see him come out and just dominate people and do what he should be doing. You know, he should be putting up 8 catches a week for 130, 140. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility for him, especially when you got Shaheed on the other side. You got Michael Thomas roaming in the middle. You got Alvin Kamara. You know, it's just my expectations for him are so high. And I think it's just a frustration level of watching this offense. But I know I need to redirect my frustration to Dennis Allen, because again, at the end of the day, you got to blame the person who's in charge. You know what I mean? Like if you go to Target and your cashier's an asshole to you, you're going to be pissed at the cashier, but it's like the reality is you should be pissed at the person who hired and quote unquote trained the cashier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's perplexing with Olave because you saw him do so well with guys like Jameis or Andy Dalton in at QB. And
well, look, he had his issues. He hasn't done well with contested catches ever. But that's been a knock on him coming out. Right. But I never questioned his effort last year.
Right. But it was like the issues were contested catches. They weren't like, oh, he's out of position or he's not finishing routes or he's even. If,
we knew he had to get stronger.
Yeah. Even if he's the guy who just streaks down the field and the ball's never going to him, like you never worry about him slowing up. So it's just perplexing as to what's going on. I mean, maybe the easy answer is that there's just something about his chemistry with Carr.
There is none. There's no chemistry.
Well, yeah, or lack thereof, as opposed to, you know, maybe Andy Dalton was one of these guys who's just a lot more, simple in his approach and, you know, black and white and is like, yeah, man, that's the play. Let's run the play. Whereas Derek Carr obviously comes with his frills where you can see how intense he was. That mic'd up episode from the Titans game where he's very much, in the players' faces. She run, effing run. maybe that's not Olave's cup of tea, but either way, again, you're a professional and, you need to just roll with that stuff. But it goes back to this. They need to figure that shit out on offense, but the team as a whole it just looks like it lacks leadership, DeMario's doing his job on the defense as a player leader, yes. But I'm talking more about the way the team is run in general. You can just see there's not the same like march in unison of guys like there was under Sean Payton. And this isn't a Sean Payton versus Dennis Allen. It's just that, you see that same like unified approach. Everybody's marching in unison. Everybody's pushing the same direction, rowing the same direction. You see that with other coaches around the league. I mean, shit, you see with Doug Peterson, who just beat us. I don't see that out of DA. I see him wanting to say the right things and trying to say the right things, but talk is cheap. The things that he's doing, like the way he didn't just bench Penning, the way he's making these, he's throwing his receiver under the bus at a press conference to make himself look better, saying, yeah, that wasn't the route that was supposed to be run. But we found out it was the route that was supposed to be run. He just didn't run it the right way, or staff decision on why Jimmy Graham's not being there.
He's deflecting responsibility.
That's what I mean. It's just they're not indicative of a guy who should be running this ship. And, when I've talked with people who are like, what do you mean you're just going to can him? Like, who else do we hire? I'm like, literally anybody. I mean,
people would kill for this job as a head coach.
Yeah. And
you're talking about an ownership group that will literally keep you around forever if you just show a shred of competence.
The bottom line with DA, we can overanalyze it. We can get into the nitty gritty, but the bottom line is he's 18-42 as a head coach. He has had his chances. Okay. He keeps saying, we're working hard. I haven't done a good enough job, or I've got to do a better job. We got to get this fixed. It's like, no, you have had the chance to get it fixed. Yeah. You have not gotten it fixed. And it's not just this season. It goes back to last year. We have seen enough of a sample size. And everybody said like, oh, well, his record is really just indicative of his days at the Raiders. Well, his record's not good enough here. Okay. What he has done here is not good enough with what he has at his disposal. And so
well, we need to stop comparing him to Sean Payton, and we need to stop comparing every quarterback we have to Drew Brees. Because those two we're never going to have another player the caliber of Drew Brees at any position. And so, let's just get over it. Stop pining over the girl who broke up with you. He's gone. He's not coming back. Same thing with Sean Payton.
It's time.
Let's stop doing this cosplay Sean Payton offense. Get someone new in charge in the building, and let's start everything fresh.
Yeah. And then the other thing people bring up, because I agree. I mean, that's why I say you see other coaches around the league, even younger coaches. I mean, Mike McDaniel and
gotta love him.
That whole team is bought in, and I'm sorry, Dennis Allen, putting me or team over me on a t-shirt, that's not going to do it. Okay. That's nice. It's nice and all. It reinforces a good message, but you got to do a little bit more than a t-shirt to get the message across. I mean, it's not like us where we have the Fire Dennis Allen t-shirts to get the message across. That's a good way to get the message across. But the only one other thing I want to add is that some people say, well, but he's too good of a defensive coach. Our defense has been better than it's ever been. What are you're just going to get rid of that? And it's like, well,
yes,
that's the price to play, because yes, it has been an amazing defense compared to the defenses we've had before. But look, DA ain't the only defensive coach out in the league. There very well may be other guys who could do it, but I think it's also because we have good talent as well. You bring in a good defensive mind. Shit, bring in Aaron Glenn. He might want to come back to New Orleans, but maybe not as lateral.
I don't want a defensive-minded head coach. I want an offensive-minded head coach.
That's what I mean. Glenn probably wouldn't come back.
He's not coming back from a lateral position. It's head coach or bust.
But there's other, assistant defensive coaches that could do what Allen has done on the defense, and you bring in a better offensive mind. Everybody's going to be after Ben Johnson, but I think you got to look for the type of guy that galvanizes people. You just have to. And Dennis Allen, he ain't doing it. People want to play for him. They love him. But you hear Mike Thomas saying, like, I want to do it for DA. I want to do it for DA. And Mike Thomas is a DA defender, but honestly, I think Mike Thomas might defend anybody who's his head coach. He's just that type of guy.
Yeah.
But, I think we are, I know we're in agreement that, my only question to you for clarification, are you ready to say, get rid of him right now and just start the process mid-season? Or are you saying I
would absolutely start it mid-season.
Okay.
Right now. He would have been gone already.
So I think,
but it's not going to happen. Nick said that. We all agree on that.
It won't.
There will not be. The Saints organization is not the type to do something like that mid-season. What's going to happen is we'll finish out the season. They'll do their quote unquote evaluations of the coaching staff along with the players. And then we'll probably have them for another goddamn season because we'll somehow finish, 7-10, somewhere between 7-10, 8-9, somewhere in that range, and be a game or two. We'll be in contention for the NFC South until that last week of the season. Like, it would not shock me if that final game against the Falcons gets flexed to Sunday Night Football and it's for the NFC South.
I'll put it this way. We've talked about Loomis and just the whole ownership group in general. If they let him slide,
they're going to,
without winning the division.
They're going to. It's a mom and pop operation. We've touched on this. It's a good old boys like, hey, we're friends with this guy, and nothing is going to change with that.
Yeah,
for Loomis, we just need to hope he decides to step away and it's time to go pass the torch to someone else, and he can just go retire somewhere. As far as DA, I hate to say it, it's probably going to take him being here for another couple of games in the 2024 season, starting off like 0-4, 0-5, and then maybe then they pull the trigger. But you know what? Honestly, we've gone on this enough, I think, for this episode.
Yeah. No, all I was going to say was that if they'd let him slide, I think that's when we seriously have to call for Loomis's head, because that's just it's inexcusable if you don't let him go if we don't win the division.
Yeah,
that's all I was going to say.
I agree with that. But so that's going to wrap up this episode. We'll be back in a couple of days with a preview for the next week's game. Until then, fire Dennis Allen.
Buy the shirts. Do that.
What a comeback!